your mind, lost in
Flip. The fact that you can feel things so deeply is what makes you a great storyteller.
I think I have to be a good storyteller in order to keep up a podcast. You know, it
Indeed.
It
But,
is.
but in order to be a good podcaster and a good storyteller, you have to be in touch with emotions. The thing that I've come to learn and to really love about podcasting is its intimacy. Most people listen to us through earbuds or earphones, and they take our voices and the stories we tell, and they put them between their ears, right inside their own heads.
Yeah.
And I love the intimacy of that, but I also love, it's an honor, but there's responsibility too.
There is. There's a lot.
Yeah. And I will, I want that responsibility to, well, hey, look, it's like having a showbiz career. It's getting into the TV or movie business. It's a mountain, and getting onto that mountain is an almost impossible challenge. But that's not the hard part. Far harder, once you've gotten onto the mountain, is staying on the mountain. And that's kind of the same way with an audience, because
Sorry.
no worries, acquiring an audience is hard, as we both know. It takes a lot of work. But then you have to keep the audience. And to keep the audience, you have to keep delivering what it is that they come to you for.
The number one thing that my dad always put into me was to always be yourself. Because the thing that people are going to love about you is who you are as a person, not who you're representing, not what type of fictional character, James Bond 007, you're trying to portray. It stems from what makes you, this is why, like, I've had even friends or even classmates be like, you're not scared to talk the way that you do. And I'm like, that's just how I am. Yeah, I'm not. Ooh, I'm like.
What does that mean?
Because I'm the type of person that voices my opinions and expression. I'm not a person that holds back. I'm like, I always warn people. I'm like, look, I'm gonna lay it down straight. It may not be pretty, but it'd be honest. And it's just like, again, to my point, what I was saying before, where you can play different characters. You could pretend to be somebody that you're not. For me, I'm not interested in that. I'd rather be myself, and if that means I have limited people in my life, that's fine. Because I'm living the best life that I can live for myself, for nobody else. And that's all that matters. Plain and simple.
How did Shakespeare put it in Hamlet? To thine own self be true?
Yes. Ooh. Oh, wow. I can't remember Shakespeare off my top of my head. I would have to go through at least 6 to 7 different plays.
I really, a couple of his plays I adore. Hamlet I love, and Macbeth is, wow. There's
you have to go in depth with them. Yeah.
Talking about the creative process, there's the great English actor Ian McKellen. He had I don't know if he's done it recently, has a one-person show that he tours with called Acting Shakespeare, in which he talks about his experiences as an actor acting Shakespeare. And then he brings it all around to what it's like to perform Macbeth, the Scottish play, which is actually Shakespeare's shortest play. That's the one about the Scottish, it's the Scottish play. It's all about murder and mayhem.
Okay.
And
okay.
It contains a bunch of Shakespeare's best monologues, and a lot of them belong to Macbeth. And so what Ian McKellen did is he kind of broke down the story of the play, and then he he performed each of Macbeth's monologues in chronological order so that you saw the emotional rise and fall, his emotional arc of the man. And when he got to the very last monologue where he says, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps at this petty pace, you suddenly understood why each and every word that Shakespeare had chosen was fucking brilliant. And when he gets to the last bit of the monologue, it is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And when McKellen got to that word, nothing, you understood that from a writer's, from an actor's, from a performer's, from the audience's perspective, really, the character arrived at his endpoint.
Yeah.
And as a creative person, watching someone break down not just their process, but really the genius of Shakespeare's process.
Well, it's a real interpretation of being realistic and being, one of the things that you have to like start to comprehend as you get older is this idea where storytelling, when we're talking about filmmaking, even in particular with writing, all of this is curated. So if you say something that is not a part of the major stream or what is allowed to be discussed or how it's supposed to be expressed, it's not going to be allowed to go out. But isn't the whole idea, like, again, to your point, like the whole idea of like Shakespeare is not, who gives a fuck that it was made 500 years? I don't care. The idea is of what the story is giving to you, what these characters are going throughout the story. Their progressions, their emotions, their even the depictions of these characters. If you think about in the different plays with Shakespeare.
If I mentioned Romeo and Juliet, you understand the story that I'm talking about. I don't mean the particular story. I mean, oh, yes, the kind of boy gets girl, boy,
Right.
And everybody dies at the end kind of a story.
Yes.
But yeah, you understand. Hey, if I say Hamlet, you kind of understand the character Macbeth or Lady Macbeth. It's remarkable, really, what that person created.
It is.
I was really lucky. It's funny. I set out to be an actor. I went to a place called Vassar College, and it had a small but very good theater department, a drama department. Meryl Streep came out of the Vassar College drama department. I don't think they turned her into Meryl Streep. I think she was Meryl Streep before she entered the doors there. But I think they did well by her, and she did well by them. Being a drama major, you had to take a lot of dramatic literature classes too. You had to understand plays and what made plays work, and you had to understand how they were written.
Well, that honestly is. I was talking about this with an actor I had on. I think his name is Matt Drago. I even was saying that there is a major difference between theater actors and non-theater actors. Like, so much to the point that if you watch the movie, you can literally see the difference if you're paying attention. The way that they perform is completely different than other actors. Like,
it's true. I can tell you, as someone who's hired many actors, when I've hired actors to act on a TV series or film, the last thing I ever wanted them to do was act. Because the thing about the camera, it's a lot like the microphone, but the camera sees everything because it's right in your face. Acting is when you're on stage, yes, you have to act because the people in the back row have to see and hear you. And it's about, there's some amplification these days, but it's about projection. For the camera, because there's a microphone there too, you don't have to project anything other than your honest self. And so what I always hired actors to do is to be whoever they are, as honestly, as nakedly as they possibly could be, with the character name we gave them and the words that we stuck in their mouths. I needed them to be as honest as they possibly could be. I didn't want them to act, because if they acted, absolutely a fact, it's going to end up on the cutting room floor because shit, they're acting again. Really and truly. So for film acting, the craft, and it is a craft, is learning how to really to go with the flow of the emotion of the scene and to be one with it. And that's harder than it looks. And to do it take after take after take, and sometimes with the camera in all kinds of awkward positions just to accommodate the filmmaking of the thing. It is, it's a very real craft.
It's not also the only place where you find that problem. You find that problem even within music. When you take musicians, instrumentalists, you gotta remember, some of these people are playing a G chord thousands and thousands of times, and it can get to a point where I sometimes play instruments, I sometimes make music myself. You get tired, you get exhausted, but being able to do that repetition where just at the blink of an eye, you're there. Like, to your point, you're just and you go through the motions, go through the flow, and scene cut, and you're done, and you're great. There are people that have that ability.
Be present.
Yes, very much so.
In the moment. I went through a 2 decades long writer's block and a deepening depression, and I got really lucky. I bounced just before I cashed out. I hit bounce, and in coming back, I'd been keeping a secret from myself for 45 years about something that happened to me when I was 14, and I finally went, all right, yeah, that happened to you. You got to own. You got to give yourself a break because that happened to you. And once I was able to admit that this terrible thing happened to me, and I was able to tell my own story to myself, I think I went from being a really good writer to being a storyteller. And I think when I became a storyteller, a lot of things changed. And
you see,
the way that
yeah. No, I wanted to point out something, because you bring up an excellent point, that transition from writer to storyteller. Okay.
Yeah,
and one of the greatest examples of this is, like, look at J.R. Tolkien. He was not a writer. He was a storyteller, because he was able to create within language, within depth, within emotion, within an expression.
It's funny. I was just listening to a history podcast that I adore called "The Rest Is History," and I was just listening to their Tolkien episode, and it's a lovely deep dive. And they were talking about his experiences in the trenches in World War I, and how that had a tremendous impact on the world that he created. And he was also, I think they pointed out, very deeply Catholic. And that also contributed to just his notion of the world, its own sense of beginning, middle, and end. It's funny, they pointed out that he suddenly one day scribbled out a bunch of words. what is it? There was a damn! I just went up on the first sentence of the Hobbit. There was a Hobbit who lived at the bottom of a hole. I think it. He suddenly just woke up and he wrote those words, and then he thought, God, where do I go from here? Which is an amazing revelation that when you think where he went from here was so incredible. But you're exactly right. He invested so much of himself, but so much into creating a vast and remarkable world that when you look at how, and here's the trick, other people filled their heads with that world.
The Silmarillion, which came from his son, which is crazy. Crazy.
Really, that any artist, that this is what we do, that we, whether it's a song or it's a story, it's a movie, a book, that we communicate these abstract ideas from our heads to somebody else's. And the other person, in whatever way they do, they go, oh, I get that. And better yet, it makes their life better for having experienced it, gotten it. That, my little podcasting company, I found after I did a podcast, after I started my second podcast, and I was so deeply into it, I discovered I'd found the thing I always wanted to be when I grew up, which is a podcaster. When I found my passion for storytelling, in addition to writing, the film and TV business are, in the best of times and under the best of circumstances, it's stupid. It's ridiculous. It's almost impossible. It's an almost impossible nut to crack. These days, it's even stupider. It's stupider by exponentially stupider. And so
it's run by a bunch of morons.
Yes, indeed. Here's what I began to think. Like I said, there's a podcast that I do called the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, which I've been doing I'm in my 4th season now. And I started that podcast about 4 years ago because I needed to get a story off my chest about the making of the second Tales from the Crypt feature film, a thing called Bordello of Blood, and how the making of it just fucked up my career and my life. It really was part of why I went and had a 2 decades long writer's block. It was connected to it. But in telling that story, like I said, I discovered that I really loved this medium. And then a friend that I had grown up with, he approached me with a story, something that happened to him, an absolutely true story that he wanted to turn into a TV series or a movie. I said, oh my God, don't do it. I'll digress for a second. The thing about taking an idea from your head and turning it into a movie or a TV show, there are thousands of fucking assholes standing in your way. And at any moment, any one of those fucking assholes can derail this project just because they're a fucking asshole. To do a podcast, there's only one fucking asshole in my way, and it's me. And so long as I do the work and I find my audience, or I help the audience find it, I'm cool. Well, my friend approached me and he wanted to make a movie or a TV show. And I said, no, you don't want to do that. And especially when he told me what had happened to him, I said, no, you must do this as a podcast. And so we turned it into a thing. It's called The Donor, a DNA horror story. In the mid-1980s, my friend worked his way through medical school as an anonymous sperm donor.
Okay.
Jump forward 27 years, he joined 23andMe, curious about his health genes. It never occurred to him the ramifications of adding his DNA to a growing DNA database. He lost his donor anonymity, and suddenly 7 total strangers found Daddy, except 6 of them had no idea their actual biological father was this guy, a sperm donor. And these are 27, 28-year-old people who suddenly discovered the fact that, wait, I'm not who I think I am. This guy's son. The seventh was a young woman who had known for about a year that she was donor conceived, and she'd been looking for him. And that Hal is what I call him in the story, because I needed to keep various people's identities private, because it's a crazy, crazy story. He had been married for 2 decades to a woman who brought in a son from a previous marriage, and he had raised that son and eventually adopted him as his own, but he never raised a biological child of his own. And so when he suddenly met this half dozen plus biological children of his, he really kind of wanted to have whatever much of a family relationship with him that they wanted to have. He was very open-minded to it, and he was a wealthy man, and so he was willing to help them or make them feel familial in that way if he could. He was quite open to it. And it was the seventh, and there were various, possibilities. One or two of them, they were so blown away by the fact that they didn't know this was a shocking piece of information that they just quit 23andMe altogether. Their minds were blown. But the seventh, the daughter, one of the daughters, she had been looking for him for a year because she was aware, and she brought a thing called genetic sexual attraction to the table.
Oh my God.
It is the craziest fucking story I had ever heard. And
Jesus,
he agreed to let me turn it into a podcast. And like I said, it's called The Donor, a DNA Horror Story. It's 7 episodes. And while I was producing this and telling this story with him, I discovered that as a form of storytelling, this is wonderful. And hey, this would still make a great movie or TV show. But rather than having to go and trot it in to a bunch of places and try to explain to them what the story is, I don't have to explain anything. It's there in the podcast.
Yeah.
And, and I think when there's a certain critical mass point of the audience, someone's going to look at it and go, hey, let's snap that up. And rather than me have to go into them, well, they're going to come to me.
Yeah.
And so part of what I think podcasting gives people like you and me the chance to do is to flip the power dynamic with the money.
It's
because it's our content really can have considerable real value.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say.
No, you bring up a really excellent point. I mean, I think that I personally have always had the hardest thing was we have to always follow a voice or an opinion. See, for me, I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish community in upstate New York, right outside of the city.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
Yeah. So I left
You
the
were
community.
Hasid.
No, I was Orthodox. I came from my dad is Moroccan and Sephardi, and my mom is Ashkenazi and like third generation American. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Oh, this is a whole other conversation. We'll have to have another podcast because we can go off on a whole fucking tangent right here, my man. Right here, man. We can just go running amok.
But the thing that I realized is for a lot of, we're called OTD, which just stands for off the derech, which means off the path. A lot of us like have figured out different ways of being able to create like lives outside. I've been out already for several years, but I have to explain even sometimes like friends or classmates, like I don't see the world the same way you do. And I have to like explain to them, like even this is the most simplest idea that I can explain, which is we as Jews, see where I'm going with this? We as Jews see others as Gentiles. which means non-Jews. So basically, everybody that's not Jewish is Gentiles.
Yes. Which, look, it all stems from the fact that way, way, way back at a certain point in history, to go by the story that we wrote by ourselves about ourselves, that's what the Pentateuch is, the Old Testament, is a story we wrote by ourselves about ourselves. And when these people, the Judeans, who eventually became the Jews, when these people wrote their story, they wrote the story about how this Abram character suddenly found a deity called Yahweh and made that deity his deity. And they made a deal. And so Abram moved his family to the coast from Iraq, moved to the coast. And the deal was, you will be a great nation, not people who come in and believe what you believe. It was not a religion for sale. The whole thing was, it was a tribe.
Yeah.
And at some point they decided to mark the tribe by
as a religion.
Yes, by cutting off the ends of, the men's cutting off the ends of their penises. I'm not quite sure when that happened or why specifically that happened, but that became a marker.
I will tell you the thing about, particularly when you look out through history, when you look at different civilizations, if we're talking about like even the markscapes of what history has left us, Jewish people have always kind of been what we now call mobile homes. Okay.
Oh, indeed.
Or trailer homes. We kind of were like the gypsies for the Middle East. We were a constantly moving civilization. Like, yes, we kind of do have land that belong, is called the Kingdom of Israel, but history has changed so much to the point.
It all comes down to 79 AD. There's just very real moments in history when the Romans, they destroyed the Second Temple. They threw all the Jews out of Jerusalem. And shortly thereafter, more of the Jewish wars continued. And basically, once the Jews were expelled from Jerusalem and then Judea, that is when the Jewish diaspora began. And we were not allowed there. And we were kept out of there for the most part. And so Jews went to Alexandria, and Jews ultimately went through the Levant, and they went ultimately through Asia Minor and Turkey, and what ultimately became Europe. Yes, and that became, that's how the Jewish diaspora happened. And what also happened is that because the Jews stopped, there was no longer a temple. And so the whole religion changed. The rabbinic Judaism became interpretive.
Yeah.
And so really the whole nature, but one of the other keys to Judaism, it was never looking for converts. In fact, because it marked the men, it did it in a way that basically said, you're going to have to do this if you want in on this group.
Yeah.
And that is in part, really, it just goes back. It's just an echo of because we began as it's a tribe. It began as one particular tribe.
Here's a crazy part. Like, to the point, even like, you're talking about the story with DNA and having these people being able to find like basically their long lost biological father. For my own family, okay, we were in Spain, and then the Spanish Inquisition happened, and our family spread out. We were able to find
Were you conversos, or did you leave? Do you know?
So, according to our family, there were 4 brothers, and one brother that we come from, his name is Shlomo. He went down to Morocco, and we've tried to be able to trace on our family. To this day, we have about 2,600 and something family members altogether in about 13 different countries across the globe.
Wow. Oh.
Isn't that crazy?
You and I are going to have a separate conversation for the donor podcast. For a bonus episode. Oh my God, we have to talk about that. That is.
But
I'm enthralled. I'm enthralled.
This is a point I'm trying to get at, is where if we look at our history, we have to understand that, like, we spread across the globe. That means cultural traditions, things that have been passed on. I mean, even living here in the United States, if we think about it, like, we literally live in a place where a bunch of people have different cultures. They brought them over here, and now they're sharing that with us. Like,
that's the great thing about America.
It's like
that is American exceptionalism, is the fact that we were the first nation of other nations. That is our unique genius. It's not white guys and their money. That's not American exceptionalism. No. It is the fact that all these people from everywhere else in the country came, and they brought their dreams and their wishes and their desires and their willingness to work their fucking asses off. And some of them willingly, and some of them because they were kidnapped and forced to come here. But all those people brought their cultures, their tastes, and their genius. And wow, they brought it all here. That, if there's any kind of American melting pot, that is it. It is this amazing brain trust from all over the world, which I don't mean to get political, but the current environment is just fucking that up. God, why would you piss all over the thing? It is the goose that lays the golden egg, you fucking idiots. All right, I'll shut up.
No, you have a very good point. I have a classmate of mine. I'm currently in tech school, and he was in the Marines. And I was talking to him about what's going on with Tulsi Gabbard, because here you have somebody that serves honorably for their country, and literally knowing from him the amount that you have to sacrifice for yourself, the amount of discipline, the amount of things you have to take into account, and even time you're spending away from your normal life, like your family and people that you care about. And then you have people disrespect you. Like, if somebody disrespected him, I might punch them. It's like, it's not that she's better or he's better. It's have respect for people that can do something that you fucking can't do, okay? You're not capable of doing. So respect the fact that they can do something that might actually save your life one of these days. That's it.
We are in strange times, but then our tribe has endured many such strange times in the past, and we're still here.
It is. It's interesting how you can almost ignore everyone around you, but yet still claim that you're present. Ignore how other people are feeling, how other people are expressing themselves, but you're in. I'm not saying you in particular. I'm just talking about in general. And I've seen this personally. It's like you're hello, like, this bubble you're living in, it ain't real, and it's not going to keep you floating very much longer. I promise you that.
Indeed. I think, alas, America got revealed. America didn't change. America got revealed for the country. Actually, we always have been. There's a real, we want it to be so much better than it was, and certainly than it is. But there was always a bullshit contradiction that was always there. And God, we tried to deny it, but denying the truth is always bullshit. You cannot in good faith say all men are created equal and then cut a deal with slavery. That is such a contradiction. Right off the bat, you are full of shit if you think you can say one thing and then do that. So,
Yeah.
right, really, if we're honest, it really is when Ben Franklin, after the Continental Congress decided to be the kind of country we were going to be, he walked out the door and someone said, what did they vote upon? What kind of country are we going to be? And he said, a republic, if we can keep it. And the answer to the question was apparently no, we could not.
I mean, haven't we learned from Star Wars? Republics don't last. No, Republics don't last.
Indeed. They're very hard to keep up. It takes an awful lot of work. It does, and it's heartbreaking.
Here's the thing, and this is the revelation which we live in now, which is instead of, we have odd 50 states. Each place that you are, each place that you're living, you can be able to create opportunities from there. I've been able to speak and be able to see people that you build locally. Okay, you have indie filmmakers, you have indie producers and artists, DJ makers. I met a couple of, and they scrabble a bunch of people together. It's hilarious. I think there was one film that was made out in, I think it was Montana, or not Montana. There was another, Canada. My apologies. Filmed out in Canada, and they basically had like a bunch of sponsorships that came together to make the film. It wasn't made by Hollywood or big block play, and it's good. It's just we have more access than we ever had before. So you could choose to swallow the bullshit cereal, or you could venture out and maybe find something unique and exotic.
Or make something unique and exotic.
Yeah.
It really is. There's empowerment there. It's not easy, but to me, podcasting, it comes back to that as a platform that anybody can start from. It's incredibly democratic, and really and truly, it's telling one's own story is remarkably empowering.
It is.
Helping other people tell their stories is even more empowering. We are living in a time when I think people will be searching, will be searching for empowerment, having so many other people trying to disempower them, that everything that we as storytellers can do to remind people or give them access to how they can empower themselves simply by telling their stories, finding community in their storytelling.
Yeah,
it's the best medicine.
It is, and it's interesting because sometimes you'll find inspiration in the most, I'm talking from the most wildest ways possible. It could be a dumb comment that somebody makes, or it could be a remark, or it could be something on a piece of paper, something you even see on your phone. And you just have this moment, and it's like, as we say in the car biz, we fixed it. It's turning on. It's working. A big excited moment. You can't force it. That's something I've noticed. You can't force it to happen. You
Nope.
could try to do yoga, Pilates, sweating. I promise you, I don't know. It's like almost like if you want it, you have to be patient to find it. And then once you find it, you have to be patient to do it.
Being in the right place at the right time actually means having been in the right place at the wrong time up until that moment. And up until that moment, everyone was looking at you going, what the fuck are you standing there for? And then the thing happens and everyone goes, fucking genius. He saw it coming.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, you did. And so long as you had the patience and the perseverance to wait it out, you have to see the creative process is like any struggle, even a civil rights struggle.
Mm-hmm.
It's a struggle. And that means you have to see it as a marathon.
Yeah.
a long-term race, multi-generational in some cases.
Yeah.
And so if you get sucked into reacting to the vicissitudes, the ups and downs, the bad days, and decide, oh no, there's, the fight is over. No, it's not. And on the good days, thinking the fight is won. No, it's not. You have to always keep the largest possible picture in your head, just to understand where you are in the process. Another way to another metaphor is, it's a mosaic.
It
And
is.
we are all just tiles in a much larger mosaic. And as much of the mosaic as you can take in, that will give you the best possible chance to really appreciate where you fit in, how you fit in, and hey, all the other pieces that you can impact.
Yeah. I wanted to point out, there was a scientist that had theorized that this idea of what we believe consciousness, or if you want to call it God, actually what it is basically consciousness. So you have, like, to your point, you have the different mosaic tiles that make the big picture. So basically, it's not one God, it's gods. We are all gods. Everything is all combined, one entity. But the incredible part is that one entity can have so many different parts, different complexities, almost.
You could even approach it this way, from a scientific, if everything in this universe started in a singularity, then yeah, how much more everything from the same stuff do you want to get beyond a singularity? It's everything in the universe crunched into one teeny tiny infinitesimal point. So yeah, it all comes from the same place.
It's like with gold, for example. When you gold plate things, you could spread gold an exceptional amount, but the thing is, it still has limits. You can't coat an entire table with, not enough gold. It's just, but
You need enough time and space in the continuum to go around.
it's the same idea even with us people, because if we go back a few 100,000 years, right? Okay, I get it. There were different species of humans, and we're discovering new ones as the years goes by. Great. But there's only Homo sapiens that still exist now. So we basically come from the same people. We literally come from the same people. It's bananas when people are like, well, they're different.
One of the things that I did as part of the donor, the podcast, people who subscribe get a bonus episode every month, and those are absolutely worth the $5 I think we're charging.
$5, damn, bro.
Yeah.
You're bringing back
really
2000s vibes over here.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm starting something out here. I'm trying to build a customer base here, but
nice.
Because I'm telling the story of people who looked into their DNA, I thought, all right, I'll look into my DNA. Now, I suspected that I am 100% Ashkenazi Jew. That was my suspicion, and that turned out to be the case. At 23andMe, there was some interesting information, not any great depth. All right, they said the part of Northern Europe where a lot of my family came from, and yeah, okay, around Lithuania. Okay, cool.
Same.
But there were a couple of things relating to my mitochondrial DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And what they can tell us about our mitochondrial DNA. And there are subgroups to mitochondrial DNA. And our mitochondrial DNA is constant. You can follow our mitochondrial DNA back a long way if you can connect it to it. And what was quite remarkable is that my subgroup, my mitochondrial DNA subgroup, can all be traced to one woman. And this is, I don't know, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people probably. With this subgroup, it can all be traced back to one woman who lived in the Levant 2,000 years ago. We all million or so of us, however many there are, it's probably more than that. We're all ultimately from the same woman born. That fucking blows my mind.
One of the greatest examples that I give people, particularly if you want to talk, we were talking earlier about Jews, Sephardim. Sephardi Jews they're like the closest things you can get to what Jews were 2,000 some. And it's bananas because I have that problem. Okay, I'm Moroccan, but yet I have Jewish features. And then I have people that think that I'm Latin, or I'm Hispanic, or I'm from Spain, or something like that.
You're in a real fix.
Yeah, real.
There are all kinds of different reasons to be suspicious of you, my friend. But
the bananas part was, according to my DNA, I have lineage going back 2,000 years to Mesopotamia, Lebanon area. And
yes,
it's just like, wow. Okay, they didn't lie to me all the way. Okay, they told me a little bit of truth. They threw in, like the Mormons, they threw in a little bit of truth.
Have you ever done anything at like Ancestry with your family tree?
It's really difficult. So I spoke to my grandmother about this. My on my mom's side of the family, they came in during Ellis Island in the early 1800s. Like the late 1800s, like, towards like the early 1900s, like 1899.
Sure.
And
yeah, that was when a lot of us came.
They didn't really have, let's just say they didn't really have very kosher paperwork. So nothing was really properly documented. My grandparents, they have documents. I don't know where it is, but like Ancestry was really hard to find. My father's side was almost impossible.
It's too bad.
Yeah, I know.
I got really lucky there when I had a first cousin who'd done some family treeing over there, and so I knew there was a little bit of stuff to find. I was shocked, super shocked by what 23andMe turned up. Now, usually for Jews, because especially Ashkenazi Jews, many of the Ashkenaz lived outside of official record keeping. The ones who lived in shtetls in the middle of nowhere, they might have occurred in a census here and there because they wanted to know, how many of them were living in the district. But it's unusual when you're Jewish to be able to go too far back in record keeping to be able to trace a family tree with any depth. And I was shocked because of my father's mother's father, a guy named Havis Cohen. Cohen.
So you come from Kohanim.
I do. And
you can't marry a divorcee. You know that.
Now he tells me. Well, I think because something to do with the fact that there was a whole line of rabbis, whole line of them. I can trace my lineage back to someone who was born in 1460.
The reason, so to the audience that's listening, the reason why this is Kohanim and Levium, which are like the two tribes, they are considered the highest class. They won't say this in Orthodox communities, but they're considered the highest class of Jews. So their documentation and record taking is astonishing. It's
unusual.
Astonishing.
It's unusual for in the group, and it was a literate group, but they didn't keep church records in that way. I don't know. Yeah, it was just a different was different. Wherever those records were kept, a lot perhaps they were all destroyed. I don't know.
Well, also keep in mind, I remember a lot of Kohanim and Levium, particularly in Europe, had close connections within government, particularly regards around like rabbinical circles.
Sure.
So, you have, by the way, the same thing applies even in Sephardi cultures. You have certain families, like Toledano is a very famous family in Morocco that they have records spanning a very, very long period. Reason being is that you've had certain groups of Jews that have coincide with government. Why Morocco is complicated is because Morocco doesn't give flying fucks about any other government except theirs. So they're like, you want our documents? Fuck you. That's just Morocco. And they're not the only Middle Eastern country that's like this.
Morocco's also had a very unusual history with the Jews inside its borders. It's actually been one of the kinder, gentler countries over the course of its history.
Well, they're the only Arab country to this day that, so Arab just means ethnicity. So you have Arab Jews, you have Arab Christians, and you have Arab Islam or Muslims. And Morocco is kind of like Switzerland for the, North Africa, Middle East area, whatever you want to call it, where all three religions coincide with one another. So meaning they have separate governments. So you go to different courts. So if you have, for example, a Muslim doesn't go to a Christian court, and a Christian, it's weird and it's strange, and it's like very odd to Western culture to think like this. But Morocco's not the only country like this. You take a country like United Arab Emirates, it's even more insane.
I would not hold up Western culture as any kind of paradigm.
No.
I'm just wonderfulness at the end of the day.
I'm just giving comparisons.
No. But our perspective keeps shifting, and
yes,
it's like we used to think that way yesterday before new information dropped on our heads.
The most hilarious thing I heard the other day was there was this old timer black man. I think he was from the South. I think his name was Richard. He was talking about when they had the civil rights and they were going through segregation, and then they were allowed to go into these like white diners. And he's like, I was really proud, but the food wasn't that great.
Oh, what you weren't missing.
He's like, hey, listen,
food was better where they were by a fucking ton.
I know. Oh my God. It was just hilarious. But you know what? Hey, they marked something really important in history. And I mean, they found out. They found out they weren't missing out that much. I'll tell you that right now.
I wanted to make sure that you and I had a chance to touch on the other thing that's part of what I think your podcast is about, which is cannabis.
You haven't been noticing?
Yeah. Well, I had my hit before we started. I'm a wake and bake guy. I from start of my day to the very end of my day.
Oh, hell yeah.
I like flour. I'm a flour guy. I love Durban Poison before I work. Hell, I love Durban Poison before I play sticks because it just slows you down. It's just a lovely wide beam of focus.
You like shatter?
No. Pure flour.
Oh, pure flour. Okay.
Pure, good quality flour. Yeah. With a high THC content. Yeah. What I like to do, I don't grind it in advance. I crumble it up in my fingertips before I'm about to use it. And I've got a pipe that I love.
Ooh.
This is my genius pipe. It's metal. It's all it's magnetic, and it comes apart like this. And the inside, you see the baffles. That's the filter. And so the whole thing is that. And so you put your little thing there, and you hit it there. It's
like the future.
It's quite simple, and you can't break it. And for me, that was. Wait a minute. You can drop it, and it won't shatter like God, I've broken so many pipes that I love.
This one has already been cracked, but it's held up so far. But I oh my God. It's one of the most heartbreaking things. Okay, I'm sorry. As a stoner, it is the most heartbreaking thing when you have your beautiful jug or your bong and it shatters. You know, it's like you have to have a you have to have a Levia. Okay,
I'm gonna live forever, baby. Remember my name. It's the genius pipe, and maybe if I had 2 brain cells, I'd create an affiliate deal with them, and I would hawk them like a crazy person. Wait a minute.
You know what's wild, by the way? A while back, I live here in Florida. I ran into this guy that was like 77 years old, and he like hardcore stoner. I mean, the man was smoking a joint the whole entire time I was talking to him, and it was like an hour. Okay, he was like quick, you know. It's just like, just new one, just kept going. He was telling me that he went to get a scan of his lungs, and his doctor was like, his lungs were fine. This man has been smoking since 1969.
It's not the same.
I'm not a doctor or a physician. I'm telling you what this man told me and the picture he showed me on his phone. So I understand there's carcinogens that I just...
It's not the same in 1,000 different ways. Among the things that I'm proud that I created, for a little while, Weed Maps had a news division.
Really? I did not know that.
They had a news division. And when they had the news division, they hired a bunch of people from the LA Times. Well, I live in Los Angeles. I know a bunch of people at the LA Times. And one of them hired me, and I wrote a 13-part, 28,000 word piece called Blunt Truths, a history of marijuana prohibition. Really going deep dive. I've always wanted to tell the story of Harry Anslinger, the man who made marijuana illegal. And the reason really that bugged him, Harry Anslinger was a former prohibition cop. He was, to his credit, he was a very good bureaucrat. A very good bureaucrat. He also happened to be a world-class racist. And in his spare time, he loved to play the piano, classical piano, European classical piano. There was a kind of music that Harry Anslinger detested. No, he fucking hated. Jazz. It disgusted him. And the thing that disgusted him about, the music disgusted him, the people who played it disgusted him. And he became aware when he first became the drug czar in 1930. He had no money, no power, not a whole lot of people working for him. And they were worried a little bit about opium. No one gave a fuck about cannabis. It was not on anybody's radar. But it got on Harry's radar as jazz began to proliferate. And as all the people who created jazz, King Oliver, especially Louis Armstrong, Jelly Roll Morton, famously, they looked at cannabis as not just, it wasn't something they did in their off hours. Cannabis was part of their creative process.
Yeah.
And it goes to the thrust of the fact that alcohol and cannabis are not even remotely the same thing. What they do to our brains are completely different. You could not create jazz while drinking. The first thing that alcohol does is it completely screws with your motor skills, which cannabis does not do.
And by the way, to your point, the reason being is cannabis, in your brain, you have what's called the endocannabidiol system.
Indeed.
Which means that when the weed enters your system, it interacts with that part of your brain. This is a real thing that exists inside of your body right now. The same way your body releases DMT when you die and when you sleep, the same way that when psilocybin enters your brain, you can see on a scan on how it literally interacts in the back of the brain. And all of a sudden, like you could see the flow just like boop, and it just flows right down. And it goes down from the spine, through your back, all the way down. Why? To your point, it's not just him. You have people like Richard Nixon that decided that him winning a stupid presidential election that is 8 years, who cares? Now we're 40 years behind in ibogaine research, MDMA, psilocybin.
Oh, yes.
The list just goes on. And guess what? It's 2025. Cannabis is still federally illegal in the United States of America.
It will be
what?
it will be universally legal relatively soon, and for one reason, and that's money. And as soon as it goes off Schedule 1 and the banks can begin to invest their dollars into it, that's what everyone's waiting for. And look, because it's about money. At the end of the day, that will win every argument, hands down. The money. It will.
Both are green.
The money will overcome. Yeah, it will overcome the racism that started the prohibition in the first place. And it's really sickening when a fucking alcoholic like Richard Nixon is taking a dump all over something like cannabis. It is so fucking sickening. When I bounced and I came back from the near dead, one of the things that I ultimately started, I started taking a mood stabilizer, and I got lucky. I found the right one, and it worked very quickly and efficaciously. And what I didn't expect was it made all alcohol. It gave it a grapefruit skin-like aftertaste. And
I know what you're talking about. Oh,
and so I stopped drinking.
It lingers
like It's just unpleasant. And so I loved martinis. I loved great red wine.
Yeah.
All of it instantly became, and so like on a dime, I stopped drinking. And and I probably drank more than I should have, but I'm quite sure I did on multiple occasions. All right. I am now what we would call California sober. I do not drink. I smoke lots of cannabis, and I haven't tried psilocybin. I've done mushrooms. Yeah, I've done mushrooms once, and it was wonderful. I would do it again in a heartbeat. But I have no use for alcohol, and I don't know. I find myself. Yeah, I guess it's the converted. I find myself looking at alcohol culture, and I'm constantly shocked by its wretched excess.
It's interesting. If we go back a few thousand years ago, when the temple did stand, one thing that stands out was they had a ceremony where they burned essences. Okay. And I heard this from a rabbi, and he confirmed this. He said that one of the essences that they believe was used was cannabis. And he explained to me, he was a really cool guy. He explained to me that reason being was Israel is a great place to grow weed because of the dry climate and because of the mass amount of sunlight that you have. It's just a great place. And it also is very soothing. And when you have Kohanim and Leviim, that a lot of their practices was singing, they were singers. So this whole idea of like, even within our own tribe, connecting with the earth, connecting with the plant, and giving back from our own self, it's just, this is not a Richard Nixon issue. You're taking away thousands and thousands of years of cultural rituals and history from vast amount of cultures.
Look at where it flowed from. I think they figured out that it started somewhere in Mongolia, and then flowed along the trade routes, and it ended up everywhere. That's how you get. Well, Durban poison is a South African land race.
Yeah.
It's not native. It didn't start. Cannabis didn't start there, but when it ended up in South Africa, it kind of nativized, and that's what makes it a land race. And it became a kind of plant unto itself.
It's very adaptive.
It's a weed.
It's crazy because we as people have been using hemp for thousands of years as clothing. I mean, they have artifacts. You can go to a museum right now and find hemp clothes, from archaeological sites. Like, this idea of where we live in a society that does not use hemp anymore, that does not use cannabis, is only the past 95-ish years
of utter stupidity,
right,
based on racism, based really on one racist man who hated jazz, and therefore, there was resistance to what he tried to do. Ultimately, the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. Even when he tried to illegalize it, there was no constitutional basis. There's still no constitutional basis for it. So the attack was via as a tax. They created a tax and a stamp that you had to get to prove that you had paid the tax, but you couldn't get the stamp because they didn't print any. And so the way that they caught the very first people within I think 24 to 48 hours of that act going into law, the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, 2 guys were arrested, I think, somewhere in Tennessee, and charged with trying to sell marijuana without paying the tax or having the stamp, and they both went to prison for it. Yeah. But hey, that's how they got Al Capone too, right? They didn't get him on organized crime; they got him on tax evasion. That's always the tool that the man uses. All right, I'll get you on tax evasion. Well, it's clever.
It's a great way. It's a great way to have a raid, not rave, raid.
Yeah, it definitely means it too.
Oh God, you know what? Speaking of which, there's been a show that I've been watching. It's called. Have you heard of Severance?
Great show. Creepy as fuck.
I started watching the show before I went to tech school. I was working in a corporate job where I was refilling CPAP supplies for patients. I was in the job having a mental breakdown while watching this TV show.
Yeah. That show could precipitate that kind of reaction to being in a corporate environment.
I got terrified sometimes of like going to the elevator at work. Like, I'm not. And by the way, just earlier point, Severance feels so real. Okay, it doesn't feel like something that's made up. It feels like a genuine, real thing that could be happening right now. But the scariest part about the entire show is you know absolutely nothing. You know nothing. You know nothing.
That there's a whole most of the world's
they don't make any
information
sense.
is not. Yeah, you don't really fully understand how this world works, and it's happening all around you.
It's like they have smartphones, but yet they use typewriters and punch out boxes, but yet they have ID card. But yet they use digital computers with, before they had the laser mouse, they had the optical mouse, with the ball. Come on. Like, it's confusing. It's really confusing.
It's
It's fascinating.
Oof. Usually there's in that 1984 kind of way, there's the fear of the big, powerful, moneyed, corporate, corrupt power. And yeah, it's all the different subversive ways that they come for us. That show encapsulates the paranoia.
What are you, an innie or an outie? That's the perceivement of choose. Are you an innie or an outie? And wow, you're talking to yourself as if you're two completely different people. That should come off as insane.
Yes. And yet but you understand the logic of the two.
Yes.
And the two different environments in which they exist have to keep going.
It's weird because they both live in desolate environments.
It sucks. It sucks either way. What does winning look like in this environment? That's
you know what the wild part is that the man that the one of the geniuses behind this was the man that gave us Zoolander. Ben Stiller. Oh my god. He should go down in history as the man that fucked up a lot of human people's brains with his mad creations. I will say
that is one of the goals of being a creator, isn't it? Is to, in the nicest way possible, fuck up people's brains, or just change how they think for the better, hopefully. But that is the point of storytelling.
I mean, he has a substantial amount of power. Let's be honest. And I mean, he's been in the biz for an extremely long time. So obviously, someone like him could do whatever the hell he wants to do. Doesn't need permission.
You know, the nice thing about places like Netflix, if there's a nice thing about, and Apple, and it's what was true about HBO. And when I did Tales from the Crypt at HBO,
it's not the same way anymore, though.
But what was great about them, which I think is true about these places, they let the creators alone. Over the course of the 75 episodes of Tales from the Crypt that I wrote and produced, I think I got 3 notes from HBO total. If we'd been doing that for a network like ABC, CBS, or
oh my god,
it would have been
monstrous,
thousands of fucking notes. HBO and the streamers, they let the creators create, to their credit.
It's wild because if you take
they don't pay them, they haven't paid them correctly.
No, they don't.
Fuck them for that. But
Alan, the thing is, if you look at even companies like Apple, okay, they do that with their creators, but at the same time, they have slave labor making their products in China. And at the same time, they force their ideologies on their employment, and they will fire people for the most outlandish things. It's like, okay, so you're cool with this, but yet you're fucked up as hell in everything else. Right? It's crazy. It's like, who would think Apple, out of all places, would give you severance?
Well, not being an Apple person, I'm not shocked. So, and while I'm PC, I ain't in love with Bill Gates either.
He never created anything.
Right. But if you had to live in the Microsoft world, you were always subjected to Microsoft's
bugs,
lines of code that just don't belong there. And so, why the fuck did the app do that? Stupid code. But okay. It's Apple. I don't like being told what to do. I'm bad that way. So I don't know. Apple always felt like I was being told what to do. While they're telling me, no, with us, you can create anything you want. Just do it our way.
It's really wild because if you, it's just a story as old as, it literally is a story as old as time.
Now you got me doing it, dude. we've been sitting here so long. I got to catch up.
You have to catch up. No, but it literally is a story as old as time, where it's just the repetitive motion of, you have these brilliant minds, then they die, and then it just turns into,
they get replaced by others.
Yeah,
we all get replaced.
I mean, look at, Walt Disney dies from smoking way too many cigarettes, and that's on, they literally photoshopped like cigarettes out of his hand. But anyway, look at Disney now. Like, look, I'm 26, and again, like, there's an age difference between me and you, but you could probably also see the major difference between like Disney of yesteryear and now. I can't remember a time where it's hard to explain. It's like, as we keep going further, they keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
If you want to have funny thing about Uncle Walt would have been so unhappy to learn that someone like a Michael Eisner had been running his company.
Yeah.
Because he's Jewish.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as we...
But by the way, okay, look, here's the thing, though. Sometimes you need crazy people in order to make incredible things.
Oh, it's absolutely... Look, it's... Alas, just because... You cannot separate all of the bad, either the behaviors or the bad ways of thinking, from the artists who you love.
Yeah.
Hey, I love T.S. Eliot. Man was a rabid anti-Semite, but I have his poetry floating around inside my head. There are artists whose work I really enjoy, but who I know really would detest us because of who we are.
I know. It's almost where you have to separate those parts of the person. It's, you either can view them for who their life is or what they have made. One thing that is,
there's the innie and the outie. Yeah, see, but that's exactly it. You have to live two lives, the one inside and the one outside. And the one, that goes along to get along, and the other that's scared as fuck because it doesn't know what's coming.
What scares me sometimes is watching those videos of people about my age, or like people in their 30s, or even sometimes even people older in the 60s, talking about the very same fucking shit we're talking about now. Like, literally to the T. Only difference is they don't have smartphones.
Not much changes, really.
No. But you wonder now, with how everything has been advancing the way that it has, is there an opportunity for a new way of storytelling? A new way of how it's no longer where individual runs, it's individuals rule.
There are always new ways to tell stories, and you got to find the new ways because the audience, they get bored with hey, they start taking the story for granted. If you can throw an interesting plot twist in, well, hey, then you found a new way outside the box. But yeah, it's mandatory that we keep finding new ways to, well, what are stories? Stories are an exploration of the human condition. And so as we continue to live these lives that we're living, we need to continue to examine them, and they almost demand that we examine them in new and different ways as we go.
Yeah. Always finding, it's all about not staying comfortable. It's about always finding new ways to better yourself. I feel that, look, that chair is awful comfy. I'm telling you right now, it's a lot more fun out there if you just venture out for a little while.
There are two different ways, two essential different ways of seeing the world. There's, in essence, the conservative view, and there's the progressive view. And there's actually an independent. There's a moderate view in between the two. But the conservative wants to keep the world. Well, it's right there in their name. Conserve. What do you want to conserve? You don't want to conserve the future. It doesn't exist yet. Usually, what they want to conserve is as much of the past as still remains in the present. And really, if they could take us back to the past, that's really what they want to conserve. They'll, as much as, like I said, as much as the past is in the present, let's conserve that and go forward grudgingly, if at best. Whereas progressives, that too is right there in our name. What it is that we want to happen in the world, we forward progress. We want whatever it is now. Surely there's got to be a better way to do it. Let's find it. Let's do that. And so this is the dynamic tension between these two ways of seeing the world. And you have this large group of people in the middle as well, who are trying to accommodate both. Yes, there's sometimes you can, but sometimes you can't. You can't find a middle ground, for instance, with evil. You cannot compromise with evil, because evil will never compromise with you. You're the only one who compromises, and now you've turned a little evil. Well, evil didn't turn less evil.
No, I mean, the greatest example of that is if you look at modern medicine. Majority of it comes from Nazi Germany. Majority of it comes from Nazi scientists that experimented on people for 5 years. Now, a lot of people benefit from a lot of these medications and procedures that exist now that have been perfected over that time. Does that still excuse the amount of evil that came from the people that made this stuff? No. But
the entirety of human history is a product. Well, certainly, a lot of it is the product of incredible cruelty to somebody. Hey, we had slavery in this country. We still have slavery in this country. We just don't call it that anymore.
No, it's called prisoners. Remember, it's a different word. It's a different word these days.
Yeah. And that's one of the legalized forms of slavery. Yeah, is paying prisoners. But hey, anyone who doesn't want a minimum wage is really bucking for slavery. Because at the end of the day, what was slavery at its bottom line? It's wage theft. The whole point is, I'm going to get all your work product for free, minus whatever it costs to house, clothe, and feed you, to keep you alive, so you can produce the work. Everything that you produce, I get for free. And that was the point of slavery. And in the American South, there were 3 big cash crops that were very labor intensive: tobacco, sugarcane, and of course, cotton. What slavery allowed the people who grew that stuff to do was to get all the manual labor required to get it from field to factory for virtually nothing. Imagine
they made a fortune.
Imagine if on the other hand, if the South had been forced to pay fair market value for every last bit of that labor. Now, maybe the Confederacy wouldn't have ridden and revolted the way that it did over slavery, but hey, it might have become the first great worker state in the history of the world.
I mean,
oh well.
No, to your point though. You look at places like Detroit, Michigan, okay, where you had the entire car industry. The American car industry was based there. And you had tons of factory workers and people that were relying on those places to stay afloat. All right, we're moving out. And you
what was that? Yeah, what was the whole "we're moving out" decision based on? What was
cheaper labor?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah. And sometimes somebody else's gain becomes somebody else's benefit. Not in a good way. And it's just you have to, I don't know, I feel like you have to be able to stay in the present and be able to realize your strengths and your weaknesses. And even in the hardest of times, that just gives you more of the reason to get yourself back up.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yes. Before I forget, because you mentioned your podcast, do you have any social links, a website, perhaps?
I do. We've got 5 podcasts going right this second. I've got 10 more in various stages of they're knocking on the door and just about ready to come out. The main podcast I do is the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, which you can find at www.hownottomakeamovie.com, all separated by dashes, unfortunately. But there's also The Donor, a DNA horror story, which is at thedonorpodcast.com. There's also a great new podcast I didn't get to mention called The Hall Closet, which is an offshoot of The Donor. Donna Hall was one of the donor-conceived people who very kindly agreed to talk to me. When Donna told me her story, I thought, oh my God, that's a podcast unto itself. Donna grew up in a lower tier crime family outside of Philadelphia in the 80s and 90s. Her family wasn't the Corleones from The Godfather, but they made national headlines just the same. Donna's mom, Phyllis, might be the worst mom ever. For sure. For real. She was in headlines. She was referred to as the Home Alone mom of Bucks County. She spent 6 months in prison for child endangerment. Donna's stepdad, John Hall, was the Philadelphia Police Department's favorite snitch. He put more than 25 people behind bars based on bullshit confessions that he needed to get himself out of legal jeopardy of one kind or another. Among the people he put away was his own stepson, Herb, for 18 months on a murder charge that Herb he did not do. John Hall also put a man named Walter Ogrod on death row in Pennsylvania for 24 years on a murder Walter had nothing to do with. Donna describes what it was like growing up inside this insane environment, always feeling a bit like she didn't belong. She learned at the age of 40 that she was, in fact, the product of a sperm donation. She didn't belong to those people. She was half, but not entirely. And she's an amazing storyteller, Donna. She tells her story without an ounce of pity. She's smart. She's funny. And it's not just a story about true crime. It's really her search for safety and, most importantly, empowerment. Donna, I'm biased because I've been working with her. She is a rock star as a storyteller. I dare anyone who listens to the Hall Closet podcast at thehallclosetpodcast.com not to fall in love with her as a storyteller and just be on the edge of your seat waiting for the next episodes, because it's the craziest fucking story I've ever heard. Hey,
it sounds like the craziest story.
Look at my history of storytelling, Tales from the Crypt, Outer Limits. I love strange stories, and that's what I'm working on these days. All these strange, true stories that I keep bumping into, and people keep coming to me with. Hey, one of the things I've learned since I became a podcaster full time, really, is that everyone has a story, every last one of us. And because everyone has a story, everyone's got at least one podcast in them. Some people, they have lots and lots of podcasts in them, but everyone has a story, if properly told, that would fascinate everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my mission in life, is to tell every last one of those stories if I can.
Indeed. And hey, you can make it happen. You're gonna make it happen.
I'll die trying.
Yeah.
But hey, man, as long as I got enough dope, I'm cool.
Yeah. Did you get that on the, on the stone? Like a little joint holder?
Absolutely, positively. Yeah. I cannot tell you. I cannot tell you how much fun this has been.
It's been an absolute pleasure, my man. I mean, I think we went through 5,000 years of history.
Oh my! Plus. Yeah, we went. Where did we not go?
Right. That is the question. Indeed.
Let's do this again sometime.
Sure.
I don't know when, but let's commit to it. I think we just scratched the surface of all the places that we could go and talk about. So
we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it after. But listen,
yeah.
But listen, Al, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. And I mean, hey, nothing like a good story told the right way, right?
Hey, there you go. Yeah. That's the secret sauce.
Hey, secret sauce. Mama no tella, no, I'm not going to tell you that, hey. So, to all of you, if you want to check out more of the podcast, you can find us at Lost in the Groove Pod. And with that, we'll catch you on the next one. Peace out, motherfuckers.